and welcome to the By Intent podcast with me, Rakhi Natha. I love what I do, and one of the reasons is because I get to speak to amazing women like Inka. So, our guest today is Inka Immonen. Inka is a biohacker. She is the founder of Biohacking Women. She has an MS in neuropsychology, and her work is complemented and integrated with yoga and meditation. She's a certified teacher of both. And I have so many meaty questions, as you can imagine, for Inka today. So I'm really excited to be speaking with you, and welcome, Inka.
Thank you, Rocky. I'm really excited to be speaking with you too.
Fantastic. And Inka's coming to us all the way from Finland. So thank you again for your time on this particular evening. Really appreciative.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very nice always to chat with like-minded women. So I'm happy to be here today, and I'm thankful, grateful for you to have invited me.
Fantastic. And I think I'll start with a question you might be getting quite often, which is, one, is there a difference between the sort of neuropsychology of how, a man's brain works and how a woman's brain works, and kind of leading then from there, the difference between the male and female brain, and then leading into the question of why you decided to start a female focused biohacking brand, which I think is remarkable. It's amazing. It's unique. But we'd love to understand, why, is there a need for such a focus and why you moved in that direction?
That's interesting. Interesting question, and there has been a lot of debate about is there sex dimorphism in the brain structure and function. I believe so far there is not real evidence for that our brain are super different. At least when we are born, we're born pretty much similar type of a brain. However, the brain is molded and affected by culture and our everyday experiences all the time, especially during the childhood. So it's natural that when women get more of this sort of maybe signals of nurturing, they socially learn to be more maybe empathetic, take care of children, and they learn things like this. So that might change how the brain organizes and what it specializes to. So we should always keep in mind that the brain is specializing all the time based on what we practice. And that would be, I think, the mechanism in case we have some sex dimorphism, why it happens or how it happens. But there is no super convincing evidence that it would be different, like at least in like greatly different. There has been some sort of discussions also about the size of the brain. Do men or women have bigger or smaller brain? Normally, the size of the brain is more related to body size. So, if there is a systematic difference in body sizes, then there might be a systematic difference in the brain. But yeah, I think practice and cultural influences change the brain quite a lot.
Yeah, wow, that's so interesting. And I didn't actually know about the body size and kind of the brain size. I mean, it makes complete sense. I was reading some sort of article recently about how the human physiology is changing as we evolve, and I think it was around just our facial structure getting smaller and something along those lines. And it's interesting how brain size might be affected as well, but kind of, going too deep down that sort of hole. But um, I guess then, in essence, my understanding of what you're saying is, if we take a young girl and she's put into a particular environment and socialized around a very different environment, maybe there aren't any other women around, and so she's seeing sort of male role models and how they're behaving. You'd see really different personality traits and socialization, and think, okay, this, the brain is different, but it's really about the modeling that's happened there.
Yeah, we are shaped by our social experiences in the childhood, and that changes how our brain wires. So that would be um, like one big source of changes in the brain structure as well. But in essence, we all have the same ability to develop any kind of a brain, basically.
Yeah, I love that. And what made you want to focus on biohacking for women? Why a female focused brand?
Biohacking for women, the idea came from, well, it's something that I've been contemplating a lot, always. I've been biohacking ever since I was a child, basically, due to my own migraine, which I wanted to track. And I made interventions and I tried to change. And at some point, I realized that, especially around the teenage, I'm like, okay, as you start noticing more the hormonal changes and they affect your everyday life. And I felt like there were different, like naturally different types of seasons, let's say, in my body and mind based on the hormonal cycle. I was like, I don't know, does this like increasing amount of coffee or taking these supplements, do this really work for me all the time of the month? And actually, every time of the month, I need to rethink of how I hack my body, or what kind of health habits do I do? Because at some point, female body, for example, naturally requires more sleep and more rest and more self-care. So I started searching and I realized that there is not really much knowledge or much information about these differences on how biohacking should be implemented to specifically for gender or for the time of the month, for example, based on your hormonal cycle. And then I realized when I started digging into the literature that there is actually a lack of research on women. That's because before the 1980s, there was basically women weren't taken as participants to scientific research. Many drug trials or health trials, they weren't included because of we couldn't control the hormonal cycle, and there were safety concerns about childbearing potential, drug effect on childbearing potential or something like that. So all of the health recommendations, the majority is based on studies made only with male participants. And then when we started including more women to the research, we realized like, wow, there is so many differences between sexes in just normal daily habits, like sleep is different for women and men. We have slightly different circadian rhythms and we have different nutritional needs. And obviously we have different hormone functions, and there are just so many different differences in our biology that we cannot assume that the all general health practices apply to women and men every day and every time of the month. I mean, this is what got me interested, and I found out that only in 2015 there were this guideline from National Institute of Health to count sex as a biological variable when we do health research. That's such a new thing that it's actually a guideline now. So we are still sort of expecting to see more research in women and men and the differences, and how can we implement and target health habits and health interventions based on the individuality of the person. And obviously we shouldn't forget here that there are also a lot of variability within the sex. It's not only that women are one group of similar type of people and men are one group of similar type of people. We all have our individual differences. But of course, hormones is something that us females have we all have quite similar cycles in our hormones. So we can make some research on that, how that affects our our health and what we should do in order to optimize our health.
Yeah. I mean, it's so, yeah, I mean, it's spot on. You kind of forget that. You forget that for the longest time, even in just academia, a woman being allowed to study, right? All of this happening at a later stage is that we're really on the back foot in terms of being researched, being the researchers, really all of that. So yeah, I think that's, it's great to bring that awareness to that. And of course, we didn't have that data. And so it's exciting that there is a focus and that we have somebody like yourself focusing on really what's different for women. And I think kind of leading to that, especially for women, I'm married. And I think, when you're in a partnership, you attune your lifestyle to kind of be the same. But that's interesting when you talk about things like sleep. We have very different habits. And now I wonder about when we eat or other things. And I totally understand contextually, as you mentioned, we all have our individual nuances, absolutely. But what are some of those outside of course, the hormonal sort of differences? Are there any other sort of differences when it comes to men and women around some of the common things that we assume are going to be the same for men and women?
Oh, yes, definitely. There are so many. So, first of all, for example, sleep, which we do the third of our lives, women suffer 40% more of insomnia than men. And of course, we have different sleep related problems. Women actually have many hormonal related sleep problems. And at some point of the cycle, like around the ovulation, our body temperature is higher, which might actually prevent us from sleeping, or it might disturb our sleep when we need to, then we need to cool down the room. At the same time, that might disturb the sleep of our partner if the partner is the male. So something like that, for example, very typical. Also, interestingly, insomnia is more related to heart disease in women, but not that much in men. Like it's more strongly related to heart disease in women, and also lowered immunity in some research. So there are some differences in how sleep deprivation affects women and men. And I don't know if that has been systematically researched, but women report twice as much anxiety and depression compared to men. So I would assume that sleep deprivation, especially REM deprivation in women, would have more detrimental effects on emotional well-being, because REM is the important sleep phase for balancing emotions and calming down the nervous system. If we are naturally more sensitive, more maybe hyper aroused, our nervous system is more aroused or more alert, perhaps sleep deprivation might increase uh, the anxiety levels in women even more. So the sleep is interesting in terms of sex differences. Then there are obviously nutritional needs. And recently I've become very interested about the different popular diets, because now we have these trends of ketogenic diets or intermittent fasting. And I feel like we need to be very careful when recommending, for example, long fasts for women, because that might, first of all, it can affect weight, so that women lose weight. And if they lose too much weight, it can affect the menstrual cycle and fertility. And there were some research that found that with longer fasts, female cortisol levels were higher compared to male cortisol levels. So it increased more stress in women than men. So perhaps women need to be more careful about making really long fasts, for example. The ketogenic diet, there was one interesting animal study showing that the same rats, they had the female group and the male group, and they noticed that with the same diet, the female rats actually gained weight and the male rats lost weight. So that's like, yeah, so diet, sleep, I think basically everything there can be found, everything that affects hormones or nervous system functioning there would be some sex dimorphism. But we are still at the very early stage of the research, so we're still looking to see more. I hope to see more research
Yeah.
soon.
Oh, it's fascinating. I mean, um, I can definitely share that it's mainly women who I've encountered, and myself as well, who struggle with sleep. My husband could fall asleep anywhere, anytime, and I hear this from women all the time. It's so interesting, and you kind of just play it down to individual, like, oh, well, that's just who we are. But it's so fascinating to learn kind of the science, and like you said, I mean, it's the early stages, but wow, it's super fascinating. And you were talking about food combinations and diets. You mentioned, or you were speaking about something on your Instagram about a concept called nutritechnology, and I've never heard of that before. I found that so interesting. What is nutritechnology?
Yeah, so basically that was from, I recently encountered this book by Dr. Walter Longo, which is called The Longevity Diet. And the his idea, which is something that I can see, I keep seeing all the time, is that we shouldn't, or we should focus on how to make the cells of our body to renew, to increase their longevity, rather than trying to just push the lifespan of the cells as long as possible. So if you can create a renewing cell that keeps getting younger all the time, so to speak, then we would naturally increase our lifespan as well. So nutri-technology is basically how you can use food and the food combinations and mm, the compounds in the food to help your cells to renew, to sort of, yeah, use the technology to improve your health span. And I find food very fascinating. Food is obviously has been used for thousands of years for medicinal purposes as well. And there is just so many interesting compounds in ordinary foods that affect our genes, our cells, our brain, our body, like resveratrol or sulforaphane. Sulforaphane affects the activation of over 200 genes in the body. So you can basically use food as a medicine and reprogram your cells in a way.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. Gosh, and so many questions coming up. I mean, and just for the average person, I think taking almost a step back as well and saying, well, what's the difference between longevity of a cell and renewal of a cell? What do we mean by that?
Mm. Well, I mean, these words can be defined in different ways, I believe, depending on who's defining them. How I see longevity is almost like longevity can be achieved in different ways. So it's almost like an umbrella term. And renewal, like renewal can be one way in which you can achieve a longevity. So longevity would be a long lifespan. And renewal would be, so one way in which you could achieve longevity would be, the cell is born and then it starts to age until it dies. But then renewal would be, there is a cell burn and then it keeps aging, but then something renews and it becomes a bit younger. And it's almost like this cycle keeps on repeating. So the cell doesn't age anymore. It just keeps becoming youthful again and renewing itself. So that's also one way of achieving longevity. So that's how I see the terms.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And would that be kind of in line with, I've heard a few of, in the nutrition space and different experts, and I've heard something, thrown around, and I don't know the science around this, but things around the body because of cell renewal, the body kind of renewing itself at different stages. I mean, we know, for example, if you're checking an A1C level after 3 months, you know, you're going to check it after 3 months, right? Because your levels will be different. Yeah, how does the body renew? And you know, when, yeah, like, is it a year? When can you say, okay, your body is in a renewal state? I've heard things like after 7 years, you know, everything in your body's kind of been renewed. What do we know about this?
Yeah, well, first of all, I must say this is not very much the area of my expertise. So I'm sure there will be somebody much wiser explaining about the cell renewal. But how I see it is that it's very individual. It really depends on the lifestyle that you have. So, for example, autophagy, which is like destroying or of unfunctional components of the cell by cell itself, if you can increase that process, then you would expect faster renewal of the cell, for example. Or if your lifestyle supports the cell's natural way of being stress-free, so you don't accumulate oxidative stress. So, for example, you meditate and you sleep and you eat healthy and you go to the nature and you take good care of the cell, you and yourself, you don't accumulate as much oxidative stress to the cell, which makes it more functional. And it doesn't have to renew as, or maybe it renews faster. I'm not sure if it doesn't have to renew as fast or if it renews faster. But yeah, so I think that's also very individual.
Mm, yeah. No, that's interesting. And kind of, you know, we going really back to the root here. It's a question we haven't delved into, but my limited understanding, I don't know too much about biohacking, just a little bit, and I know it's very catchy, so everybody talks about it. And you know, my limited understanding again is just what we do to incorporate practices for longevity, or to prevent disease. You know, it's the how do you prevent Alzheimer's in the future, and it's making sure you're exposing yourself to learning every day, or learning languages, and you know, keeping your brain exposed through brain games and reading, and you know, those sorts of things. But what is biohacking?
Yeah, biohacking. Well, I think you really tapped into the essence of biohacking, which is implementing these everyday lifestyle practices that have shown scientifically to improve your health and well-being. One thing that some biohackers like to do is to self-measure as well. So it's a lot about your individuality. Whereas in general, we talk about health practices, which are based on scientific research, that are studied in wide populations. We see that in general, people need 8 hours of sleep per night. But does that apply to you? Does that apply to me every single night? It doesn't always. Sometimes I need 9 or 10 hours of sleep if I have sleep deprivation. And sometimes I need a bit less if I'm already feeling quite good. So how can we then know what we should do?
Yeah.
Except reading those articles and the general recommendations, we can measure ourselves. So, for example, we can use things like Aura Ring to measure our sleep health each night, our nervous system recovery. We can use apps to measure our own emotions. We can use vitamin and blood tests to measure our nutritional needs. And then when we gain this deep insight of how our body functions individually, we can also target the health interventions better to ourselves.
Mm. Yeah, that's fascinating because, you know, one of the other questions I had, which it's so pointless to ask. You've answered that already. Was what are your recommendations for women and how do we implement this? But I think, that's exactly the point. It's so unique to each individual. But you mentioned, what did you call it? Was it an aura ring? What was
Yes.
that? Tell us about that. Yeah, I haven't heard about that.
Oh, okay. Well, I actually don't have my Aura Ring right here at the moment. It's in charging, but Aura Ring is it's a great way of measuring sleep, in my opinion. It's a piece of health technology with 3 sensors that detect your motion, detect your heart rate variability. I don't remember what third sensor was for, but what you basically get out of it is you have an Aura app, and after each night you see what your heart rate was throughout the night, what your heart rate variability was throughout the night, how much REM sleep you got, deep sleep. So the sleep parameters are based on your body temperature, your nighttime HR, your movement, everything. And yeah, it gives you recommendations. For example, it gives you one number which is like between 0 and 100 for recovery, and one number for sleep. So it might tell you, hey, your recovery tonight was 75. So maybe you should take it easy today. Maybe you are a bit stressed. So try to take it chill today. Or then in one day it might give you a recovery index of 89. And it's like, oh wow, good recovery. You should, like, you can go and exercise today. And so it's a good way of gaining insights into your sleep and recovery. And also you can add tags there. So for example, I like to track some of the supplements I use and how those affect my sleep. So then I can follow trends. For example, every day that I take melatonin, I sleep a bit longer or better, perhaps, or I fall asleep faster. That's the common effect for me. Another thing might be that every day that you record your exercise, you might see a trend that, oh, exercise improves my sleep. And then you might see that, oh, every time I take 1 or 2 glasses of wine, I lack deep sleep or REM sleep.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
So
no,
that
that's
also gives you
amazing.
some nice insights about your personalized health. It's like a personalized healthcare assistant. And Aura is not the only sensor or only health device that does this. These are becoming more and more popular. Now we can use sensors to measure our stress levels, our meditation moments, our heart rate, like basically everything. Well, not everything, but we're getting there
Quite a lot.
slowly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's that's incredible. That's so exciting. Yeah, I'll definitely do a bit of research into that as well. And I had no idea that there was something to that extent, right? In that level in regards to monitoring sleep, which is pretty amazing. And
Mm.
the other thing I found so fascinating as well, and I really loved about your profile was your academic background and the combination of neuroscience and psychology. That is so interesting. What you shared a little bit about your journey, right, into biohacking, but yeah, tell us about what drew you to the combination of these two fields. How they work together, and just your journey in that direction as well.
Yeah, of course. So I think I became interested in psychology at quite a young age. Um, I think it all started, or at least it was a big influence, that I was suffering chronic pain, and I didn't find any use from conventional medicine. I'm suffering from migraines, unexplainable migraines, sometimes cluster headaches, tension headaches, and there is no single established medicine for that. So I tried several, and I realized that these are not going to help me. They didn't help me. So I started learning psychological tools. So first I went into pain therapy. So it was basically psychotherapy targeted for pain patients. And then meditation, mindfulness, all sorts of practices from positive psychology. Um, and I realized, like, wow, there is a lot of tools that we can use here. And then, of course, because pain is always, there is always some anxiety related to that, perhaps some like sadness or self criticism, so I realized that there is like these are all some things that come from inside me and are not necessarily related to the pain itself. It's how I view the pain. So how can we improve that? How can we improve our emotional landscape to support our recovery and healing from all of those physical symptoms? And I found those tools so good, so good. Like they were my savior, honestly. And I soon, like I'm still always reading about new drugs, but I don't really that's not my first way of trying to treat my pain, because I don't even have that many migraines anymore. Um, After starting biohacking
Mhm.
and optimizing
Amazing.
the psychology,
Yeah.
mental well-being, and everything. So yeah. So then, obviously, when I started academic in psychology, I realized that this is just, I don't know, I just love learning about human mind, learning about our how humans function, how we have functioned before, how has that changed, what kind of individual differences are there in our personality, how we view on things, optimism, pessimism, personality, temperament, everything. And then I've always been fascinated about the nervous system, I guess also due to my migraines partially. And then I just yeah, just linking these two are so fascinating. And I think we're in such an interesting and intriguing phase of brain research. We don't really know much yet. We know very little about the brain, about the functional networks in the brain, about how genes affect our brain, about how lifestyle affects our brain. And we have just revealed within the past 30 years or so ways to measure the brain. And this is all very new to us. So it's very, very exciting field. And I love how psychology and biology and the research, like molecular biology and psychological research, are slowly becoming integrated. And we realize that almost everything that we do have biological basis. There's like almost like an interesting triangle of psychological research, biological research, and philosophical research, because we still have so many unanswered questions. So yeah, just I just have this passion towards these things, and I don't know that, like, some level I can explain why, on other levels it's
No,
just something. I guess we are all born with some sort of,
yeah,
I
yeah.
just like this. I just like
Yeah,
this.
I can totally relate. And it's funny you said philosophical, because I was like, yeah, I think I fit in that philosophical box, but just having those questions, right? It's having questions about certain things and how they work together. So, can totally relate. And when you were talking about pain, it kind of triggered, and I remembered again that, whether you feel physical or emotional pain, it's the same center of the brain that's activated, right? It's that same region,
Yeah.
which is so phenomenal. And then just thinking, like you said, I mean, neuroplasticity is a relatively new concept, right? So you're right. It's just, and it's such, I mean, it's profound to know that kind of changes everything, which is, especially in the world I work in, which is getting people to really see beyond themselves, if that makes sense, and into
Mm.
potential. So yeah, really, really fascinating. I love it, and I think
Yeah, I love what you say. How did you phrase it? Getting people to see
beyond themselves.
beyond themselves. I love that. That's a very interesting concept or important concept. Like, I don't know if you refer to this similar concept, but I would love to hear more about what you think is going beyond yourself. So basically seeing a part of the third wave psychotherapies is this idea of that you can become observative of yourself, that you sort of detach yourself and see yourself almost like from an outsider point of view, in which way you can actually better, you're not so worried about things and you can better help yourself because you're almost like a friend helping yourself.
Yeah, 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 exactly. No, that's incredible, and I think that's exactly what I was thinking is, from a psychology perspective, for example, when you think about things like your thinking traps, right? Or you're doing CBT, you're thinking about how you're thinking, right? It's kind of, metacognition,
Yes.
right? There's that element.
Yes.
But then there is the spiritual element as well, right? And stepping back and saying, well, what am I beyond the physical, and understanding these components. So
Oh,
I think it's fascinating because there's so many layers, right? And so many levels to this.
yeah, definitely. There is a field that is emerging, which is called integrative mental health, where we talk about previously, it's quite commonly accepted that we are biopsychosocial entities.
Yeah.
And I found this interesting research article that says that we are biopsychosocial spiritual entities. And that's what we acknowledge these days more and more. That there is also some aspect of our being that we just, we cannot put into any of these boxes that we have predetermined. It's something, what am I beyond this physical realm? What am I beyond my thoughts? What am I beyond my interactions with other people? There is something, what we call spiritual.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually had this question for you, so it's perfect. But the question I had was, biohacking is so much about, or as we understand, about, the body and the mind, right? And working with that. And the question I had was, is there space to incorporate the concept of spirit, and whether part of what you do with yoga and meditation touches on that?
Oh, totally. I love that question. Biohackers are actually one of the most mindful people that I've encountered. Like, for some, like I think that all kind of awareness of yourself that biohackers sort of do all the time also makes you realize that there is something that I cannot explain. There is something that we cannot explain. And once you become more familiar with yourself, the biological part of yourself, the psychological part of yourself, you also naturally become more aware of all the other layers that you have. And for example, meditation practice is something that I would say promoted these days as a way of reducing stress and a way of calming down the nervous system or tapping into sleep or like improving sleep or something. But when you start meditating, I think as a side product, if that wasn't the main goal of yours, you also become more aware of all the sort of layers at your being that you just cannot explain. And you may feel that, okay, I've never had this experience before. Like you get this outer body experience, or you feel like self-transcendental experience or self-transformative experience. And that's something that you cannot yet measure. You cannot yet say what that was. So you realize that, oh, there is more in me than what I can explain. There is some sort of, and yoga and meditation, they are quite typical, I feel like, at the biohacking world as well. So I think biohacking definitely can include and almost naturally includes the space and has the space for these other layers of being as well.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it's great to put that out there because people often have a different perception of
Mm.
biohacking being really physical, and what we do with our bodies. But I think, yeah, exactly that examination beyond is, yeah, that's amazing. So thank you for kind of sharing that, and I think highlighting that and getting us to think about biohacking in a different way as well, in how we explore it, because there's always these misconceptions, but yeah,
Mm.
we are so we're so close up on time. This is such an awesome discussion. I know we could dig in and we could go on for hours, but is there, I've got one or two more kind of wrap up questions, but before we leave there, is there anything else that you want to touch on or share with people today? Any other concepts you would have loved to have just spoken about or shared?
Well, thank you for asking, first of all. Now that you asked, I actually would like to encourage in these times to be gentle on yourself. I feel like this is something that we are almost sent to or guided to learn and practice during these times. It's a bit weird situation going on in the world at the moment, and um, we might find ourselves more stressed, more anxious, more maybe socially isolated for sure. So these are all very new situations for all of us. And so if it feels weird or you encounter new emotions that you maybe didn't encounter before, be compassionate towards yourself and give yourself time to process them and contemplate on them and yourself well-being despite. And you know one thing that I would encourage is to avoid panicking or distressing about what's happening inside me, because this is psychologically very demanding time for all of us. So just this realizing that everybody is going through a big trouble at this moment, and it's totally normal, and be good on yourself. That would be my advice at this time or at these times.
I love that, and such a beautiful message. Self-compassion, incredible.
Yes.
Thank you. I think a lot of people need to hear that. I needed to hear that. So thank you. And I'm pretty sure anybody listening, we need to remind ourselves of that.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, no, thank you. Thank you so much. And like I said, just two kind of quick questions. And I think you'll enjoy this one. So I'm looking for really short answers on this, right? But as you know, at By Intent, we explore identity, purpose, and experience. And so I'm going to kind of ask three questions on this, but I'm looking for your short, really snappy, quick answers on it. It can even be a few words, or it can be 2 or 3 sentences. So
Okay.
so the first one is, what does identity mean to you?
um, Exploration and change, I would say.
Very nice. I like that. How are you living your purpose?
By sharing and listening.
Stunning. How do you cultivate a fulfilling daily experience of life?
By being present on whatever happens and being curious. I think being curious is very important.
That is amazing. You knocked that out of the park. That was really good.
I was very nervous.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Those are great answers. And yeah, I think in wrapping us up, tell us a little bit about just the biohacking book. And then I know you're going to be speaking or present at the Biohacker Summit. So I don't know if you want to just wrap up other ways, or, a little bit about that and ways people can find you. And I will, of course, link all your details to this episode as well. But if you just want to share a little bit about that before we wrap up.
Yeah, sure. So I work at the Biohacker Center Finland, and one of the products that we have is the Biohacker's Handbook, and that's written by Olli Sovijärvi, Teemu Arina, and Jaakko Halmetoja, and that's sort of the manual of biohacking. It gives you all the basic details on how to biohack. Like Teemu and Olli and Jaakko made so many years of research into all of these health practices, into health technology. It's divided by different chapters: sleep, work, mind, nutrition, and exercise. So you get the biohacks to target all of the life areas. So definitely recommend to read Biohacker's Handbook. It's something that I use almost every day to learn new hacks and remind me myself of something that I've learned before as well. And it's just a very good comprehensive book. And Biohacker Summit is an event also produced by Biohacker Center, and that's where people like biohackers, scientists, health enthusiasts, people interested in health technology, they gather to share ideas and information and new science about biohacking. So that's normally we have people over 30 countries all over the world, different type of people. Some people are more into the biological aspect, some people are like interested in stem cells and epigenetics, and some people are more into meditation and nature and using herbal medicine, for example, and everything like that. So all in between these different realms we have there. So it's just a very nice atmosphere to be in, especially if you are this curious mind who wants to learn about other people and learn about biohacking and science and health.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
And I also in my social media. So firstly, I would advise to follow Biohacking Book, because if you are interested in biohacking, there will be daily tips on everyday biohacks. Then we have, for Biohacking Women, we have Biohacking Women Instagram channel as well, and that's targeted for women biohackers, so health tips for women. We have an online course, biohackingwomen.com, and a Facebook group, Biohacking Women. It all can be found under the handle Biohacking Women. Um, and then in my social media, I also share some tips on that recently mostly focused on brain health and sleep and neuropsychology. But I also, of course, I'm a yoga teacher, and I also talk about yoga and meditation there. So that's just at Inka Immonen.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'll link all of those details. Yeah, and guys, you should check it out. I think it's so useful. I saw the page and the kind of info that's there. It's really tremendous. So you do want to look at those pages, and I will link everything below. Inka, thank you so much for being here with us today, and just such an incredible conversation. So much to dig into. And yeah, I hope our paths cross again at some point. But thank you so much for such an amazing conversation today.
Yeah, the pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much for inviting me, Raquel. And yeah, it was super nice to be here.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Inka. And to everybody listening, be sure to subscribe, follow. All the details will be below. And I will catch you again next week. So thanks for being here, and bye for now.